Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first edition of Ducks Morning Brew. This will be an extension for anybody new to our regular podcast, the Forever Mighty podcast, and just a way for us to cover some of the topics we normally aren't able to get to on the weekly show and be able to cover them throughout the week and engage with you guys from Monday to Friday. So most of the time it will be me, sometimes it will be Pat, Jason, Steven that will come to you with a video, but we will be putting these 10 to 15 minute videos out every Monday to Friday to cover some of the most recent news surrounding the Anaheim Ducks. So welcome to the show. One thing I do want to say just before we kind of get into things here is I want to give a shout out to Joseph Roba, who put together the intro that preceded the show today. Great guy. He's put together the intro for our regular podcast as well. So if anybody's ever looking for any videography or animation or editing, make sure to hit up Joseph Roba. His website's josephroba.com. So big shout out to him for getting into that. And as you can see up on the side here, we have three topics we're going to get into today. The Colorado Avalanche apparently are maybe not actively shopping, but looking to move Sam Girard for some help at forward. Sasha Pastujov, the Ducks' third-round pick from the last draft, just keeps torching the Ontario Hockey League for the Guelph Storm. And Jacob Perreault makes, I don't know if it's a surprise switch, but he does switch his national eligibility from Canada to the U.S. and plans to feature for Team USA at the World Junior Championships. But before we get into the Sam Girard news, we do have to cover or briefly talk about the most relevant news surrounding the Anaheim Ducks right now, which is the resignation of Bob Murray. I won't get into it really too much now because I know we'll cover that with the guys on the weekly show this weekend, and we'll go into some more in-depth conversation about that. But I do want to just kind of mention that off the bat that that is a conversation we'll be getting more into as we push into the weekend and get back to our kind of regular podcasting. But let's move on to Sam Girard from the Colorado Avalanche. Now, Sam Girard for a while has been kind of one of my favorite players and really underrated with the Colorado Avalanche. Obviously, Cale Makar is the main guy there, and now with Bowen Byram coming of age and really taking a huge step forward this year, Sam Girard's almost become the third man and the third wheel of the defense pairings on that team. But he's still an exceptional young defenseman, and normally you wouldn't see a team looking to trade a guy like Sam Girard. But apparently it comes out from Mike Chambers of the Denver Post that the Colorado Avalanche were heavily in on Jack Eichel, and one of the big pieces, or the big piece, that was being discussed in that trade was Sam Girard. And a lot of that had to do with the emergence of Bowen Byram this season and the fact that the Colorado Avalanche have struggled offensively this year. They're 18th in goals per game. Their power play, which you would expect to be in the top half of the league, is ranked 30th. So they are in some desperate need for offensive help. Plus now Nathan MacKinnon is out for the next 3 weeks with injury. So you would expect the Colorado Avalanche to be going back out to the market, seeing who's available even early on in the season right now, and remedy this offensive drought they're in before they get too far down the rabbit hole and their record is too far to come back from. But basically what Mike Chambers of the Denver Post said is, yes, Sam Girard was a big piece of the Jack Eichel trade discussions. The Avs are looking for a forward in return, and they want to lose his $5 million cap hit in the long term, so that they can make room again for Bowen Byram in the future, potentially a contract for Newhook, as well as some of their other young emerging stars on the team. And you look at the Ducks and what that potentially could present an opportunity for them is to go out and potentially move a guy like Maxime Comtois, who is apparently part of the Jack Eichel discussion, and see if there's any interest there, or a player like Rickard Rakell when he comes back from injury. With pending UFA, the cap hit already is pretty small at just over $3.7 million. And then you can either eat some of that, or just the fact that there isn't a year after this would be enticing to the Avalanche to add some short-term help. I'm sure the Ducks would have to add to that, just because of the pedigree of Sam Girard. But it is something I think that they should be in on, especially with Hampus Lindholm, also an unrestricted free agent at the end of this season. Josh Manson is an unrestricted free agent this season. So the Ducks blue line could look fairly different come the start of next year. And when you think you've got a young 23-year-old defenseman locked in for just $5 million for the next, I think, 4 or 5 seasons, those are the players the Ducks should be targeting right now to kind of add to this young core that they have. And a guy like Sam Girard can step into this blue line instantly and make a big impact. So we'll have to see where they move from here. I mean, you can see some of the clips we've had running here on Sam Girard, but he is just, prototypical modern day defenseman. One of the best skaters in the league. He plays on a team with Bowen Byram and Cale Makar, so that's very, very difficult to stand out that way. Undersized, 5'11", a bit of a smaller guy, but he just kind of has all those abilities that you look for in the modern day defenseman. So you look at this chart here from Jay Fresh, kind of outlines some of the top skill sets that Sam Girard possesses. Just an exceptional offensive defenseman. He's actually featured pretty well on the penalty kill. Not a mainstay, but when Devin Taves has been out of the lineup, Sam Girard does occasionally fill in that spot. And he's just been a very, very good player for the Colorado Avalanche. And because, like I said, of Cale Makar, and because of now Bowen Byram, and even when Devin Taves was playing at kind of the peak of his powers, Sam Girard kind of fell to the wayside there. So this could be a guy that the Ducks could be interested in. It's a guy they should definitely explore his availability and what the price would be. And now with Jeff Solomon behind the wheel for the Ducks front office staff here, it's a guy who has been touted for his analytical prowess and building up the Los Angeles Kings analytics department. You would assume a guy like Sam Girard would be high on his list in terms of quality acquisitions that he would like to make for this Ducks team for the remainder of the season. All right, moving on to Sasha Pastujov. We've talked about him a lot this year for good reason. Me and Steven recorded a prospect update show where we went not just in depth on Sasha Pastujov, but all the rest of the Ducks prospects as well. So if you want a real in-depth look at all of these guys, including Pastujov's start to the year, definitely check out that podcast from a couple days ago. But Pastujov made the decision to forego his commitment to the NCAA, sign his entry-level contract with the Ducks this offseason, and switch his commitment over to the Guelph Storm of the Ontario Hockey League. And it's been the best decision that he could have possibly made, and he's had a better start than I honestly expected him to have. He leads the OHL in scoring through 14 games. He has 25 points. His 13 goals are tied for the league, and he is leading the league in shots on goal with 60. It's just been an unbelievable rise for Pastujov. Was one of the top producers for the USN TDP last year, and his skating was apparently the real issue on why he fell off and fell to the Ducks in the third round. But man, there are no concerns, or at least no visible concerns with his skating this year because of the sheer amount of points that he's putting up. And Scott Wheeler of The Athletic actually just put out a great article where he went into Pastujov's backstory and his family and kind of talked to his coaches this year on what he's working on. And one of the kind of quotes in that article was from, I believe it was the head coach of the Guelph Storm, it might have been the general manager, talking about how his work ethic this year and his work on his skating has been unbelievable, and his transition from playing in the US and coming over and playing in a new league in a new country has been the best he's ever seen. And that's all you can hope for from a guy like that. And the Ducks need more players like these where they can hit on these third round picks and they could be potential stars in the league. And you look at this chart we have up here from Hockey Prospecting that shows the probability of him becoming an NHLer and his star probability. And these are the type of numbers you normally see from a guy that goes in the first round, not a guy that goes in the third round. You look at some of the comps there, and you see Jeff Skinner, Jeff Friesen, Rick Nash, Jaden Schwartz has been a real long-time comparable for Sasha Pastujov, and then obviously Sergei Fedorov at the top of that list. I mean, not saying Sasha Pastujov is going to become the next Sergei Fedorov by any means, but it really just speaks volumes to how great of a draft the Ducks had in 2021, grabbing Mason McTavish, Olin Zellweger, and then Sasha Pastujov. And it's just great to see his development throughout his journey and going into the OHL. And we can take a last look here at some of these numbers and see that, you know, he's leading the OHL in goals with 13, leading with points in 25, and his 60 shots on goal are leading the league. So he's doing everything for the Guelph Storm, and it's been just a great transition to a new league for Sasha Pastujov, and hopefully we'll see him with the goals and with the Ducks in the next coming seasons. Last but certainly not least is Jacob Perreault, and right on cue last night he scored a ridiculous goal for the San Diego Gulls in their 6-3 win over the Henderson Silver Knights. A classic Jacob Perreault goal, just a beautiful top corner snipe, and he now leads the Gulls in scoring with 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points in 8 games played. It's been I don't want to say resurgence, but a breakout year for Jacob Perreault. Last year was his first year in pro hockey after coming over from the Sarnia Sting, and they needed him to break out this year and become the player they hoped he would be as a first-round talent. And he really has done that this year. But the real thing, and the real reason we're talking about Jacob Perreault, outside of his performance last night, is he's now opted to switch his national eligibility from Canada to the U.S. And he had an interview recently with Stéphane Leroux on the On the Ice podcast, and there was an article that was published based on that in RDS, which is a sports news outlet in Montreal. And they talked about kind of why he had decided to make that switch and why things didn't work out for Hockey Canada in the past. And to preface all this, he was born in Montreal and moved over to the U.S. and has lived there since he's 11. So he does have dual eligibility and hasn't played enough games with either of the youth systems for Canada or the U.S. to be locked into either of them. So he was upset with the fact that he was cut and snubbed from Hockey Canada's under-18 system and just not picked for selection, and feels like he has a better opportunity to compete for Team USA and make the World Junior Championship roster. And honestly, I don't disagree. I think there's a better shot and a better pathway for him to play real valuable minutes in an important role with Team USA at these upcoming World Junior Championships. I think when you look at the talent that Canada has available versus what the U.S. has this year, this is nothing. It's still a good, very good U.S. team this year, but it's nothing compared to the stacked teams they've had over the years. And you look at last year with Trevor Zegras and what he did with that team at the tournament when they won gold. It's a great opportunity for Perreault to jump in and become an important player and potentially play with Sasha Pastujov, who we just talked to. Based on his start, I don't want to say he's a lock, and neither is Perreault, but both of them, with the way they've started and the pedigree that they bring, you'd have to imagine that whether they're playing on a line or part of the top 6, they are going to be 2 of the top offensive contributors for Team USA at the World Junior Championships. But it's been just a great start for Perreault, which is just so relieving to see. Not that we were worried about his performance last year, but now leading the goals and scoring, and now just shooting the puck more too, which is his bread and butter. He leads the goals with 31 shots on goal. The next highest is Brogdon Rafferty with 16 shots on goal. I think Vinny Lettieri also has 16. And Perreault has 3 power play goals to add to that total as well. So it's just been a really good start from him. I'm very intrigued to see how he does for Team USA at the World Junior Championships, and I think that was the best possible move he could make to ensure that he does go to that tournament and he does play a big role with that team. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the first episode of Ducks Morning Brew. We'll be continuing to put these out, as I said, Monday to Friday every morning to keep you guys updated with some of the news we normally wouldn't get to on our regular weekly show. For anybody new that's catching us for the first time or heading to our channel for the first time, we do, as I said, have a weekly podcast called the Forever Mighty Podcast that is put out every either Saturday or Sunday depending on Ducks games. So make sure to check that out. It's where we kind of get into the big topics. We'll talk about Bob Murray's resignation this weekend. We'll talk about Trevor Zegras' return to the lineup, and as well recapping all of the games from the last week for the Ducks, and tonight's game against Seattle as well, which we will be live with a watch along on our Patreon if you want to check that out. So thanks for everybody who's coming out. I hope you enjoy this new series. It was a lot of fun putting together, and we will talk to you tomorrow.